Southwest New York State is one of the most beautiful areas in the country. Winding streams, scenic mountains, and family farms that dot the landscape that during the spring and summer become lush and a fertile place. In the fall, the array of colors will take your breath away with its beauty. But things are not what they seem on the surface. In the small town of Hinsdale sits an old 1800s farmhouse along a dead end mountain road. The house's appearance is nothing unusual, just a home in the secluded mountains. But there is a lot more than meets the eye. The house, known by locals as the Dandy House, is the site of one of the most terrifying long term hauntings documented. This area of the state was originally inhabited by the Seneca natives. As with other areas, when the settlers came, they took the land from the natives by any means necessary, including massacre. According to some researchers of the area, it is believed that the current Hinsdale house is built upon a mass grave containing more than 800 Native American remains. There are also stories from the town of Hinsdale that in 1777 there was indeed a battle between the local native tribe and the settlers that resulted in massacre of the natives around the area where the Hinsdale house is located today. In the mid 19th century, the town of Hinsdale was a logical place to establish a stagecoach inn along the frequently traveled route between New York City and Buffalo. During this time, it is believed that the proprietors of the inn were Ian and Richard, who were also reported to have been rapists and thieves that used the Hinsdale house as a draw for their victims. If these two villains believed that a traveler had enough wealth by their appearance, the guest would be robbed, sometimes sexually assaulted, and then dragged to the hanging tree to die. The bodies of their victims would be stored in a crawl space or under the house until they had a chance to bury them away from the house in a shallow grave. While not officially documented in history, one particular story that always comes to light is about a victim whose spirit has been seen for the past 150 plus years walking by the pond. Around 1865, a woman named Elizabeth was traveling from Philadelphia to Buffalo to be reunited with her husband who returned from the Civil War. They were newly married before he left to go fight for the Union Army. The now pregnant Elizabeth, traveling unescorted to Buffalo, became an easy target for Ian and Richard. When they saw Elizabeth, well dressed and alone, they knew they had an easy victim and lured her to the hanging tree where she suffered a slow, painful death by hanging. Worried when his wife didn't arrive when she was supposed to, Elizabeth's husband went in desperate search for her along the route and came upon Ian and Richard, who told him that his wife did pass through but traveled on. He continued his search for his beloved wife for years to no avail. A documented murder that happened on the property was on December 16, 1888, when Alonzo Lightham was shot and killed by his 15-year-old son over an argument about chicken feed. Then, in the early 1900s, two brothers were in the woods around the house hunting when they started arguing over a girl. One of the brothers shot the other and killed him. Another documented tragedy happened in the barn that once stood where the pond is today. Warren Emerson was killed while working the sawmill in 1942. These stories of the Hinsdale house and the property only touch the surface of the pain and rage that the land has witnessed. Throughout the late 70s and early 80s, there are many accounts of families moving in and out of the house. One family, who doesn't want their name disclosed, left almost all of their belongings behind because they didn't want whatever was haunting the place to know they were leaving, or where they are now. They just sat down for dinner in the kitchen table one night like they always did. But instead of enjoying their meal, they just got up and walked out, leaving everything where it was. Another family that resided here and has come forward about their experience is the Dandy family. The first sign that something wasn't right came one day when the family was walking around the property. On the walk, they started hearing a humming sound, which they thought were echoes from farm machinery, but then it changed to what they described as chanting. Needless to say, the family cut their walk short that day. Over the next 3 weeks, whenever anyone in the family walked near the woods, they heard the same chanting. Just as suddenly as it started, it ended, but something scarier was about to start. The house itself seemed to come alive, even in broad daylight. Lights began to turn on and off on their own. The stove would turn on and off by itself, even when the family was cooking, going as far as adjusting its own temperature to whatever it felt like. The faucets would also turn on and off on their own, often just turning on and flooding the room. If that wasn't enough, the windows opened themselves and then slammed closed again, and that was just the beginning. Their son Mike had a bookshelf above his bed, and one night while sleeping, all the games he had on the shelf fell off onto him, but the shelf remained in place. At first, he didn't think anything about it and replaced the games. A couple hours later that night, a chest he had under his bed came up on top of him all by itself. Then one day, the Dandy children went to their father and told him about a loud, dragging noise they kept hearing coming from the attic. Mr. Dandy went to check it out, and while up there, the whole chimney dismantled itself. The strange occurrences were not only witnessed by the Dandys, but others who visited the family. Guests, as well as the Dandys, started to see strange women walking in and out of the house and on the property. These women were not dressed in modern clothing, but long flowing gowns. Then one day, while looking out the windows, the family saw many strange faces, but when they went outside to confront what they saw, nothing was there. They went back inside, and there their faces were right inside the house. All the lights then started flickering as strange-looking animal faces stared at them. From then on, the family avoided looking out the windows for fear of seeing the threatening faces of these animal-like apparitions. Soon after, things turned violent for the Dandys. In a prominent place in the house, a portrait of the family was displayed with pride. When the family returned home one day, they saw, suspended in the air on its own, a letter opener pointed directly at the heart of one of the Dandy girls in the picture. Shortly after, things began to escalate. A lamp was thrown at one of the girls and shattered on the floor. The family immediately locked that room, leaving the lamp where it was. When they opened the room again, they found a playing card, the Ace of Spades, also known as the Death card, in place of the lamp. One cold morning after a rough night's sleep, 2 of the children woke up covered in mysterious burns. The burn patterns were not normal, but random and untraceable to the human hand or object. The signs were now hard to ignore. It seemed the house, or whatever was in it, was a threat to their lives, which was confirmed even more not long after this burn incident. Grandma Dandy heard her grandson Randy driving up the driveway. When she looked out the window, she saw he had a young blonde-haired woman with him in the front seat. When the car reached the house, it backed back down the driveway. Grandma really didn't take much notice and thought he had changed his mind about coming in with the girl. But what she didn't know was at the time, Randy's car was in the garage, broke down. A few days later, with his car repaired, Randy went out for a drive, but he almost didn't return. He lost control of the vehicle and hit a tree. While semi-conscious in the hospital, he kept asking about the condition of his friend, the blonde. According to the hospital staff and rescue workers, there was no other person in the car with him at the time of the accident. The rescue workers did notice the dashboard on the passenger side had an indentation a human head would make when it hits at high speeds, but upon searching, no one else could be found. The mechanic who checked over the car after the accident reported there was nothing wrong with the vehicle that could have caused the accident. To this day, Randy doesn't remember what happened. All that was left was what Grandma saw, the fact that Randy almost died, and the wrecked car with the imprint of what should have been a crushed skull on the dashboard. The Dandies finally realized it was time to call in an expert. Things were more than the average family could deal with. This was not mass hallucinations, a sick joke, or any other hoax at this point. It was Father Trebolt from nearby St. Bonaventure who answered the family's call for help, and on April 13, 1974, an exorcism was performed in the house. During the exorcism, it is said that the whole house shook and screamed in anger. After the ceremony, everything had calmed down, but that didn't last more than a couple of weeks. As the family was beginning to get back some semblance of normalcy, whatever was in the house came back with a vengeance, and the Dandies finally moved out. Soon after, Mr. and Mrs. Dandy divorced. Since leaving, a few strange occurrences have happened to the family they believe are connected to their old house. One of the sisters came forward after the death of her sister, claiming that one day, when they were young and still living here, Laura came swimming up to her at the pond and out of the blue stated she would not live past 30 years old. Laura committed suicide at the age of 31. The police records claim that it was an accidental overdose, but her mother believed her death had something to do with the evil house. Upon his death, though, it seems that Father Trebolt recanted his assertion that a full Catholic exorcism was performed on April 1974 at the Hinsdale house. He said that what happened that day was not a solemn exorcism, because the Catholic belief that a house or object cannot be possessed. Only a human can, and he never witnessed a human at the house whose body was occupied by a demon. To this day, whatever occurred in April 1974 only partially helped. According to the current owner, Dan, there are still many spirits dwelling here, and he hopes Father Trebolt successfully chased off any demons. A secluded house on sacred Native American land, with a horrific past of massacre and exorcism. A house that will draw you in and comes alive. We haven't started here at the Hinsdale house, and things are already happening. This is going to be pretty interesting. This is peace offering for allowing us on your land. What's the matter?
Well, you want to walk with us?
You're welcome to walk with us.
Why did the whole floor just shake? laughing at me, aren't you? Because if I was a ghost and I just scared the crap out of somebody, I'd be. Right?
Alright, are you guys messing with me?
Please leave.
Very welcome.
No. Just get out.
And then my stomach started turning. I mean, it was twisting in knots. Something does not want me in that house. I keep seeing something moving in front of that window right there. And isn't that the room she said was Mike's room? Yeah, we've been to some bad places, guys. I've had some bad feelings.
I'm sorry, this is starting to beat the Pocomoke.
I've
That
never,
was the scariest place.
never had anything affect me like this.
Okay, now I'm filming so he can concentrate on himself.